Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag,
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. Okay. So I do want to mention that this meeting is being recorded and also live streamed. And thank you once again to Templeton Community TV for making that happen. We are meeting via the Zoom platform as per the executive order of Governor Baker for open meeting law during COVID-19. So our first order of business today is the approval of the meeting minutes of August 19th, 2020. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes once someone feels they want to do that.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Marks. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second by, was that Mrs. Mattson?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, we'll do roll call. Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes, so that's unanimous. And before we go on, I do want to just recap who's attending the meeting, because I always forget to do that up front. For the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee, we have Mrs. Mattson, Mr. Marks, Mrs. Kojal, Mrs. Trifilo, Mrs. Chartier, and myself, Mrs. Hughes. Mrs. Robichaud will not be joining us this evening, and Mr. Mason should be joining us shortly. We have Dr. Kazavant and Assistant Superintendent Kate Calise, and Susan Varney, our wonderful administrative assistant who keeps us all in line. Thank you. For the district tonight, and Lisa Parker representing the NDEA. So welcome, everybody. And with that, we'll move on to our next order of business, which normally is bills and payroll, but since we just met 2 weeks ago, there isn't anything right yet for us to approve, so we'll skip over that one. And next up will be public input. Mrs. Varney, if you wouldn't mind, if we've received public input, if you could read to us the public input.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. I'm going to mute myself, so when I forget to unmute, just
Let you know. Okay. Okay, we have two public input emails that were sent to us this afternoon. The first one is from James and Amy Buzzell, 110 State Road in Phillipston. It says, members of the board and those participating via Zoom or other digital platforms. My name is James Buzzell. I am submitting a few questions and points of discussion to be considered tonight. Number one, the current district budget has now been submitted twice to the member towns for consideration. I asked during the public forum for the committee and district administration to reconsider the budget, making changes to accommodate for the COVID-19 regulations. In June, the budget from Phillipston was reduced to $1 million. The committee had the opportunity to edit the budget and justify the numbers therein. They choose to resubmit a budget that was adamantly written, before any pandemic regulations that would alter the amount of the money needed, including but not limited to transportation, remote learning software, changes to teaching salaries, and PMES administration costs, as well as decreased amount for utilities, etc. Why did the school committee not adjust the budget to accommodate the requirements of the pandemic, whether that meant increasing or decreasing the budget? Number two, the first part of the budget should be teaching salaries. Between the superintendent and the assistant superintendent, the salaries are approximately $275,000. We could be paying 3 other teachers for the cost of a single assistant superintendent. Why would we add that position when we are firing teachers multiple years in a row? Which is more valuable to the students and the district? 3, lastly, I believe the children attending in-person school should leave the Chromebooks at home. The district has given the students a great advantage with the upgraded technology, and allowing the kids to transport them back and forth each day invites damage to those Chromebooks. The students attending full-time will only be in person 4.5 hours, 2 times per week. Allow the teachers that time to teach in person as opposed to using the screens during those times. Our children will be using screens for 3 other days a week for instruction. Let's let the teachers use the limited time they have for actual in-person instruction. James and Amy Buzzell.
Thank you, James and Amy Buzzell, for your comments. And next.
Okay, the next one comes from a Phillipston resident as well, Christine Bennett. I'm writing to ask you to please recertify the full budget amount. As an active and vocal Phillipston resident, you all know I have fought to save our beloved Phillipston Memorial School for a long time now. I'm still sad and angry about the decision to no longer send students there, but I understand that the current budget situation this year made it inevitable, even before the COVID crisis, I'm sorry. Our partner towns has made it clear that they will no longer support a budget which includes our elementary school. This was determined by the voters at the prior town meetings. All the no voters from Templeton and the lack of attendance by all the parents of the district from both towns. I feel as though I posted and spoke until I was blue in the face, but apparently the phrase "every vote counts" has lost all meaning. So I do share the frustration of those in my town standing up to make a point, but I simply cannot support gutting this budget any more than it already has been. If we wanted to save PMS, then a motion should have been to raise our portion of the budget, not to cut it. We were told back in March a rough amount of $700,000 on top of the requested budget is what would be taken to keep it open. I requested information from the committee chair to confirm supporting numbers, and what I have been already telling people who have asked me, because I attend the meetings, is all there in the budget. Increases to the staff salaries and retirement are about $341,000. Insurance went up $318,000. Transportation about $57,000. And special ed out of district placements and collaboratives about $122,000, equaling $838,000 in increases from FY20 to FY21. So while nothing may be exact right now, including any increases or savings that will come from COVID costs versus grants and remote learning, it's clear that the savings of not using our building this year were already more than offset by other contractual obligations. If we had passed the $20,700,000 overall budget requested last year, we would be starting at a much better place this year, but despite all efforts, we did not. We need to stand up for all the students and staff, not just those who have been attending PMS. We have all of our middle school and high school students at risk now because there's absolutely nothing left to cut in the elementary level. Those students at that age need our support too, perhaps even more than elementary kids who by and large are pretty resilient and have more time to make up any ground lost this year. Teens need positive structured activities, such as they may be this year, or we risk severe detachment and isolation. If the budget has to be cut this severely, it will surely affect all sports and arts and elective course offerings and more. We have seniors about to graduate who may not be able to take a planned course if that teacher has got to be let go. They're already losing so much this year due to COVID. Let's not take away anything else that is in our control. If there ever is a solid, constructive plan to operate our own elementary school again in Phillipston, I will likely support it, but this is not the time or the way to accomplish that. Please support the whole budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine Bennett, for your comments. I'm just checking the chat feed. I don't see any comments that have come in for public comment at this point. We will keep an eye on there. I don't know going forward throughout the meeting if we'll be able to address everything that comes in, but we will keep an eye on the comments as they come in and see if there is something we can answer or address as we go on. So thank you for reading those, Mrs. Varney. Next up, we have the NDEA. So Mrs. Parker.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Just the update for us is we have been split into our levels, the elementary, the middle school, and the high school. And we're halfway through our 10 days of professional development. So at each level, we're all working with our grade level teams, our curricular teams to do professional development to get us ready to go back to school with the kids. So we've had some great trainings and been working together, coming up with ideas, brainstorming, classroom setups. And it seems like the teachers are really getting a good grip on how things are going to be set up in their classrooms. And, we're just trying to get ourselves ready for that day when the kids come through the front doors.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Parker, and welcome back to yourself and all of the other teachers and staff that have come into the building. And I'm glad to hear that what's been going on in the past 5 days has been beneficial in getting everybody, I guess, ready for the upcoming school year and the challenges that we're going to face, as a team as we try to figure out this new hybrid model and what it means. So thank you.
And I think the teachers are really liking the slow rollout of their days. That way there's just a lot of time to process and come together. So I think it was great to do these days.
Great. Yes, I have to tell you that I'm going to make a negative comment here, but not towards us, that one of the few things that I think that the state has done right is giving these 10 days for professional development. And I'm glad to hear that you also feel that it's been very beneficial. So thank you. All right. Next up is our FY21 budget status update. Just real quick, and then I'm probably going to turn it over to Dr. Casavant, but the state has not set a full year budget yet. They did pass a temporary spending bill to give some numbers, so that has been done, but we are waiting for a full year budget number. So even though we talk numbers, nothing is truly finalized since the state doesn't have a final budget. We also, for the district, don't have an approved budget because at the special town meeting that happened last Thursday in Phillipston, our assessment number was not passed by the town of Phillipston. And in just a moment, I'll let Dr. Casavant speak a little bit more about that. We'll also discuss what that means. We're in 1/12 and what that means. And again, Dr. Casavant will speak to that. And then we'll talk about recertifying our budget since we need to do that. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Casavant for an update on the special town meeting and whatever else. And you're muted, just so you know.
Thank you. So I think I'll just start with the budget. I think that's the best way to start. And as we know, we've been in 1/12. The budget number represents, obviously the budget that we had in FY20. And what we know from experience, unfortunately, is that our costs don't come up front right off the bat. So when this has happened before, and we roll into June, roll out of June into July and into August, we don't have a lot of salary expense because our teachers don't come back until August, give or take. So, there's always a couple months there where the district is in pretty good, in a pretty good spot in terms of cash flow, which is unlike a lot of municipalities where a lot of their costs come up front. So just to kind of give a juxtaposition. So obviously we're back, and teachers are working or staff are working. We're back, and so pay starts to take place. We start doing salaries, and one of the things that we were concerned about from the very beginning was that once salaries started to flow, once the teachers came back and the staff came back, that it was going to start affecting our cash flow. Now, I want to put a pause to that because on the same side of the ledger, we've had costs and that are associated with COVID. Now, to be clear, the state has offered, and we have written for, and will receive or have received a lot of money, and quite frankly, to do a lot of things, but only directly related to COVID. So if I had, and again, I used to have the sheet almost pasted here, but 15,000 masks, plexiglass, containers to hold materials that can no longer be in classrooms, the new I should say online platform. These are all things, of course, were not in our budget to begin with, because no one knew this was going to happen, but those grants have covered them. Now, what's complicated matters is that the monies that we have received in 2 of the grants have to be expended, at least at this point, by the end of December. So when we completed our grant application to the state, and we listed those things. I'm going to use the containers as an example. They would not allow us to use the containers as an example because containers, of course, last forever. The use of those containers will go the entire calendar year. So then, in essence, we had to prorate those containers and only receive, funding for X amount of months. So if you take that type of scenario and you use it with everything that we've needed, it's actually been pretty tight. So when I say this is that there's these costs that have come that we've needed and the state has quote unquote provided. On top of that, when we start to get into the business of staffing, so folks in every field, in every business, there are some pre-existing conditions, et cetera, that would preclude somebody from working within large groups of people, and there's a process to that, and there's an interactive conference, and you may have heard such things as, of course, FMLA, which is known to us, ADA, which is an accommodation for pre-existing conditions, or the FFCRA, which is the Family First COVID Relief, and there are multiple ways that folks can access monies to that in case they cannot come to work, which of course is the federal law. But as a district, we need to then backfill those positions that need to be filled. So you have someone who maybe can work remotely, only work with remote students, but there's a classroom teacher need. Yes, some of the grants pick that up, but not all of them. So if Anne Marie were to be here, she would be, talking about that we have had to hire staff that, of course, are not in our budget, that may or may not fall within the grant categories, because you can't put everything in these grants because we've spent all this money, or we will, and so it created a kind of not a perfect storm, but an awful situation, quite, to think about. Okay, so how do we have to move forward? What we've always been worried about since the 1/12 is that once we get into the to the time frame in which we are paying salaries, we now then have to make the decision that we may be in this for a while, and you have to start then budgeting accordingly. And so that is, when you are staff intensive, the only thing that you have really at your disposal, quite frankly, are staff. Now, as we know, we eliminated 7 or 6 teaching positions and a couple staff positions prior to COVID in order to meet the budgets of both towns. So this was, again, pre-COVID. So we're now looking at a situation in which the difference between what we request and need for FY21 and what we are receiving monthly is $184,957. So you want to round up or round down, it doesn't matter. It's still a lot of money. It's $184,000. We don't have that. So we don't have that available to us. Some could say, well, you could float it, right? So you make expenses to that 184 in anticipation of receiving that money. I think that we've learned that's not something that we should do. You never know, and you have to think frugally, quite frankly, and you have to take it at its number that I may very well be at 19,544,000 a year, or at least till all December. So, and again, because of how the vote went, because we are still in 1/12 and we are paying salaries, that I've had to make the decision. And I had a conversation with the UFCW unit administrator this afternoon, is that I'm going to have to cut over 8 positions, UFCW positions, mostly paraprofessionals. And that means that I'm also not going to be able to fill several that were already open. And there are other cuts that we'll have to realize as time goes on, and they may be anywhere throughout the district. So I think if I was asked, well, what are the ramifications? What does FY21 look like? Well, I think we'd all agree FY21 looks horrible, just in general terms. But financially, we are still in FY20. If you think about it in terms of our, the money that we have to spend, I have to, I have to think like that. And this is a really, really terrible time to have to limit or reduce the number of staff that you have, given everything that we have to do just because of COVID. So now I'm going to go back to the COVID piece. But it's a reality. And as the longer we go, and the tighter that our cash flow becomes, we're going to have to start making real tough decisions. I was asked point blank, I think a couple days ago about, well, are you guys going to be, going to school soon? I said, yeah, that's the plan, that we're moving towards that in terms of hybrid. Coming up here on the 14th, it is not out of the realm of possibility. And I am not in any way trying to be a fear monger, but that down the road, months to come, if we're still in this situation, you could see us going full remote and having to lay off multiple people and stay there until something should happen. That is just the financial reality to where we're at, especially given the monies that we're having to expend in order to cover positions that we need for kids to come to school. And I would say that to both communities. What both communities made clear through multiple surveys is that it was 83% of our parents said, I want my children to go to school in one capacity or the other. That's what they said. Well, in order to do that, I need people here to teach them. I need people here to monitor them. There has not been a savings because of COVID. We have a contract with a bus company. There may be some savings to there, but we may need some of those buses because, again, they're only a third full. We might need extra buses if more kids are attempting to come to, or we need them to bring to school. There is no savings because of COVID. We are lucky right now that we have these grant opportunities. FY22 looks horrible. We're not even going to worry about FY22 right now. I'm just trying to get out of FY20 finance to staff this district so that way we can continue the cohort model and then, fingers crossed, come back full time. That will be affected if we do not receive the funds that we certified for FY21. I'll stop there because I'm sure that I've gone over a lot and folks might need to ask a question or two.
Does anyone on the committee have a question at this point? Okay. I don't see anyone. I think you've been pretty thorough with what you've said. So if you want to continue on.
So I think that the disappointment of the Phillipston town meeting, there were certainly a lot of lows, quite frankly. I think that certifying or voting a budget $1 million, which is 600 some odd thousand under the minimum net school spending number, or the minimum required amount that a district must pay. I don't know how to categorize it, so I won't. I certainly don't want to be rude, but some of the things that they utilized as methods of saving, such as school, homeschool children, that should save money because lots of people are homeschooling their children. No. That affects our foundation and enrollment numbers, how we act, and I'm going to use the word paid. That's how we receive money as a district, through our foundation amount, right? The number of kids times the whatever that foundation number is, the kids drive that. The number of actual students that are educated in a public setting from both the towns of Phillipston and Templeton, and when you are either private or go to a private charter or you are homeschooled, you do not receive a dime for those kids. Certainly people make decisions every day. It's the parents' decision how they want their children educated. So it isn't any shade, as they say, on folks who are deciding to homeschool their children, but there's a lot of misinformation out there that you're actually going to save money by having a homeschool, by so many kids being homeschooled. If I use round numbers, and I tried to during the Phillipston meeting, was $11,000 is roughly our per pupil expenditure number. So we get $11,000 per child that are resident of either Phillipston and Templeton. And so when you start taking away, say 24, 25, 26 of them next year, right? Because it's always a year in the rears, you are going to see your foundation number of students drop, and you're not going to receive that money per child. You still need to hire the teachers to teach the amount of kids that you have. So there's a lot of misinformation there. And so I think that unfortunately, this is the effect of that. If folks believe that there's a savings here through COVID or otherwise, we wouldn't be laying off staff, we'd be hiring them, quite frankly.
Margaret,
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Chartier.
can we just clarify something else? Maybe this isn't the time to address. I just want to clarify a comment that was brought up in the public input. We did not hire a new person for an assistant superintendent position. We just changed the title of our curriculum director to assistant superintendent. I just want to clarify that so that there's not false information out there as if we hired a new FTE.
Thank you for clarifying.
We kept the pay the same, and we gave her more responsibility, which is a manager's dream. So quite frankly, that was always the case, and it can't even be argued. We've had our contracts now, information requested. I don't know, it's going to be half a dozen times at this point. It's pretty clear that Kate's been here for 4 years or 4 years, going on 4 years, and we didn't add any positions. The number of positions have actually gone down, and they're going to go down more come week or two when I have to make these cuts in order to to start stabilizing the district financially. So I appreciate that question, Vic, because I honestly just glossed it over because I've explained it a few times, and it just really hasn't stuck.
And I think it's important too for the communities to understand that, that title change was strategic and something that had been talked about and planned on from the inception of the curriculum director position. We need to have someone who's next in charge when the superintendent is not there. And it's important from a reporting standpoint that people know who that person is. So, there's a lot of reasons for doing it. And again, to reiterate, it was not an add to staff. It was, just a new title that we put on with more responsibility. So
I'll just end this way, that the moves that we'll make in the next day or two with UFCW folks, will roughly, reduce, the budget by about $130,000, give or take, because when people bump, we've talked about this before. Remember, I'm still 184 in the hole from what we need. That still doesn't cover, but I'm trying not to make drastic changes throughout the district all in one fell swoop, quite frankly. But I have to tell you, if it goes as long as it did last time, I don't know that the district in its current configuration, as we try to go hybrid, is going to be feasible. We're going to have to, go full remote, and then still, by the way, still lay off people in order to do that, and then which is not what anyone wants, quite frankly, and it's not good for kids. What's good for kids is as long as it's done safely and all the precautions are in place, and we have a healthy environment, which around here we do currently. The best place for kids in small numbers, of course, as we've all detailed, is in school, and that's one of the many things I'm afraid of that this situation is going to cause.
thank you, Dr. Casavant. Just for the record keeping, Mr. Mason has joined us. He joined us, I tagged it at 5:08 p.m., but I didn't want to interrupt the discussion. So after all of that being said, the question then is, where are we and what do we need to do next? We are going to need, as per mass regulations, to go ahead and recertify our budget since it was not approved. I'm going to talk about the rule of necessity first, that if there's someone who can't participate in a vote, it's okay to vote on the whole budget, just not a line item. We are discussing things at the overall whole budget level. So we shouldn't need to invoke the rule of necessity. If discussion were to get down to a level where there was a conflict and we needed to have someone vote because we couldn't get our needed percentage amounts for the vote, we would invoke the rule of necessity. So it doesn't look like we'll need that, but I wanted to discuss that beforehand. So the first thing we're going to need to do this evening is to recertify the full year 21 budget. There's on the agenda, I did put in a lot of the legal thing, but basically in the case of a 2-member regional school district, if the appropriating authority of either member votes not to appropriate the amount so reapportioned and recertified to it, the regional school committee shall convene a special district-wide meeting consistent with the requirements of law. The requirements of law is that we would, one, need to recertify a budget that we would then present to this district-wide town meeting. Just some housekeeping information. There was a DESE advisory on FY21 that was issued in August 17th, it looks like. And the basic information said that if your district does not yet have a budget approved by your member municipalities, which we do not, your regional school district must take immediate action to adopt and certify a revised budget with assessments calculated based on the FY21 administrative update. On July 31st, 2020, the school finance office posted an FY21 administrative update on FY21 Chapter 78 and net school spending requirements, which is called the FY21 administrative update, to provide updated information on the Chapter 70 requirements for local budget planning and fiscal management. Please see below about this action, as well as the new Chapter 70 state aid and minimum local contributions. I did include the link to where that file is, so anyone who's interested in looking at the full Chapter 70 formula, that information is there. So at the end of the day, what did that do to us? I think there were the biggest change for us was that the bonus aid that is typically given at that $30 per pupil was eliminated from all of the Chapter 70 aid. So I lost, let me find the exact number. A second, down. It was $39,120 that our Chapter 70 amount went down. We are still in hold harmless, so that amount came through. The other change that we saw was a slight change. It was very small to the minimum local contributions. So what we needed to do was Ms. Geister went and created a new income sheet that adjusted for the new minimum contributions and the income amounts, which then put us just shy of where we needed to be to certify, if the committee so chooses, at the same $19,729,921. What Ms. Geister had informed me, and hopefully we can answer any questions if anyone has, is that her recommendation was to increase the amount of Medicaid we would pledge towards the FY21 budget by the differential, which was $44,776. So immediately, I'm sure as most of you are thinking, well, we said that we were using every penny of that. And her response was, that's the case. We did hear from the Medicaid people that there was one payment that we hadn't received, and she was looking into the exact amount, but it was going to definitely cover this amount. So she was very comfortable that adjusting the Medicaid amount to $244,776 was okay for us to do. We wouldn't end up in any trouble. So attached to the agenda for your viewing was this new income sheet that showed the new allocations to for each of the income or receipt categories, as well as what the new adjusted assessments to each of the towns were. Templeton's assessment stayed the same, and Phillipston's assessment went down. I believe it was about $6,000, just less than $6,000. But our bottom line number stayed at the $19,729,921. So the question that needs now to go out to the committee is what number would we like to recertify? We can start, I think we usually do, and we can have discussion after a motion is made. I would entertain a motion to, that the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee vote and certify an amount of the $19,729,921 for the fiscal 2021 budget. And if we motion and second that, we can then discuss whether we want to adjust anything.
So moved.
Okay, I have,
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Chartier and a second by Mr. Marks.
Mason.
Mr. Mason, sorry, I was looking on the wrong side of the screen. I am bad at this listening and watching. Okay, so that being said, are there questions, comments, suggestions about how we should proceed with the recertification? I see no comments from any of the committee, so I will assume that the intent will be to move forward with a vote, which we will do. So we will do a roll call vote. Mrs. Mattson,
Yeah.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier. Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
okay, sorry. Mr. Mason?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So it was unanimous to recertify the FY21 budget at $19,729,921, which is what we had previously certified the budget for. The next vote that we'll need to take based upon that number is I would entertain a motion that the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee vote the estimated income as follows. Chapter 70 income of $9,951,444. Charter school reimbursement of $27,786. Chapter 71 special regional transportation of $455,425, which are based on the Chapter 70 and 71 aid from the FY21 administrative update, FY21 Chapter 70 aid and net school spending requirements, and excess and deficiency funds of $500,000 and Medicaid reimbursement of $244,776 for a total of $11,179,431 in estimated income for the fiscal year 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Mason. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second. I believe Mrs. Chartier got there just before Mr. Marks did. Any questions or comments on the income statement? Okay, seeing none, we'll do roll call. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
and Mrs. Hughes says yes, so unanimous. The next vote we need to take based upon those numbers are the assessments to the towns. The first one, I would entertain a motion that the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee vote the assessment to the town of Templeton in the amount of $6,909,907 for the fiscal year 2021.
So moved.
I have a motion from Mr. Mason. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. I think it was Mrs. Trifilo. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll do roll call. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
and Mrs. Hughes says yes, that was unanimous. And then the last vote we'll need to take is the assessment for Phillipston. I would entertain a motion that the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee vote the assessment to the town of Phillipston in the amount of $1,640,583 for the fiscal year 2021.
So moved.
I have a motion from Mrs. Chartier. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. I'll give that to Mr. Marks. Spread the love around. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will do roll call. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
and Mrs. Hughes says yes, so that was unanimous. So we have just recertified our FY21 budget, and we will make sure that we get out the appropriate information to the towns as per the regulations so that they will have those numbers. With that being said, the next thing we need to do is discuss the district-wide town meeting because that is the next step in the process. According to MGL Chapter 71, 16B1, the Regional School District Committee shall convene a special district-wide meeting open to all registered voters in both municipalities at which the amended regional school district budget proposed by the Regional School District Committee shall be considered. Approval of the regional school district budget shall require the affirmative vote of at least a majority of those present and voting thereon by a counted vote. So the first thing we'll need to do is we will have to decide when we would like this special town meeting to, district-wide town meeting to take place. I took the liberty of just looking at a calendar and working with Mrs. Varney about how quickly we can get notifications and papers and whatnot. And throughout that conversation that we also had with Dr. Casavant, I think Trifilo, you were there as well, we discussed the merits of potentially looking to have the district-wide town meeting outside so that maybe we'll get more participation. I know there was some feedback at the Templeton town meeting that happened a couple of months ago. I think it was the end in June, mid-June, and it was in the auditorium at the school. And I did hear a lot of people say that they really wish that that meeting would have been outside. So we discussed the merits of, should we think to have this outside? We could do it on the football field. A lot of communities have done that, and it would be possible to do that. And we could potentially schedule that meeting for Saturday, September 19th. We just have to pick a time. Did we want to do it at noon or 2 o'clock? And we can discuss that. The second option we looked at was potentially doing it, say, on a Wednesday, September 23rd. We could do it 6 o'clock. It may be tough to do it outside. We'd really have to start looking at when the sun goes down. If the lights come on, I don't think it's going to be enough. So I don't know outside would work, but we could potentially do it in the gym. If we wanted to try to do it there, it might afford us the option to open up the space a little bit for people. So I'm going to put it out to the committee for discussion and thoughts on, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on what day should we look for a weekend to do it outside. Should we go to a weeknight? What would be best for our communities?
Margaret, I actually like the idea of going outside on a Saturday. I think we might get some more participation. The only thing, and I don't know how we would handle it, is would we be holding a rain date? I mean, if we did something on this Saturday, would we also do a rain date for the Sunday, just in case? It might be something we want to consider anyways. But I think I would be leaning towards doing something outside.
And
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just remember, and I would need to check on this. When Templeton was going through the process of the meeting to set up their town meeting, I thought there was discussion about if the location, something about the location, and if the location is in fact, I don't know, the high school, does that cover the field? So in other words, it'd be a lot, but you could set up. If we saw it to be iffy, we would automatically just go into the gym. If it's going to be fine, you could go to the field, but not necessarily having to post two different, because that's a whole procedure in itself to have to, to repost. I don't know the legality around that. And so I think that would be something that we could talk to council about and see if that's even, if that's even possible. Can you say the high school, but it could be in either the gym or on the field? I don't know that.
Yeah, maybe, if inclement weather, that the meeting will then take place in the gym or something. Yeah, we good to, I think, speak to council. If that's the option we look to go with, then I think that would be a very good thing to find out from council how that should be worded to ensure that we could post properly. the location of the meeting, because that does go on the warrant.
But go ahead, Sue.
I'm sorry, just another thing to consider, I was discussing with Steve Castle, we need to keep in mind if we're going to be live streaming it, if there's internet connection.
Mhm.
That's,
Like, is there enough in the building to transfer over to the field to carry that? So that's a consideration as well.
We would have to, and I'm saying this like I do it, but I'd have to talk to Mike, but we would probably have to set up at least in the press box, a WAP, an internet connection somehow. I would have to talk to Mike about that. We'd have to, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, because that's all you really need is where the equipment will be, and that would be, of course, in the press box. I will definitely check that, but I think it's definitely doable.
so Chris, that actually being said, I mean, if we could live stream it, would it be possible to do it in the auditorium, streaming it to the middle school and high school gym as well?
So that's exactly what we set up for, or the town of Templeton.
Okay.
We set up as if it was a normal, typical Templeton meeting, meaning that we, of course, were in the auditorium, and we were prepared to live stream it to the CAF. I think, though, as someone who went to that meeting, I'm not sure who else, but it was sparsely attended. It required a lot of planning to get in, because you have to sit every other seat. It was something. So I think that the auditorium, it's easier in the gym, because we know that we can fit 200, I think it was 240 when we did the math for one of the meetings. 6 by 6, meaning setting up the chairs 6 by 6, and potentially the bleachers. The field, of course, if it's a nice day, then there is no issue, because we could obviously offer chairs, but bring your own, BYOC.
Okay.
Bring your own chair, and you would just sit in destined spots. We know that folks have done, other places have done family sections. I know but it's a space where if you're coming, more than 2 people, it's blocked off, because of course you could be there, but those sections are 6 feet apart from other. It just allows you to do more if you're outside, but I think that we'd have to revisit all of that.
Anyone have any other thoughts about doing it outside versus keeping it inside? My only comment, and was that, as I've already said, I do know that as Dr. Casvett mentioned, that the Templeton Town Meeting was sparsely attended, and a lot of the feedback was because it was inside, and the auditorium was a little awkward as well. I like the idea of doing it outside as well. I would also say that if we live stream for whatever reason, we should still be able to film and get that up for people to view. It's a little different than, say, these meetings, because here, we try to look at, and if we see comments or do public input, there's really not an off-site public input for these types of meetings. You have to be there to participate, to be able to be recognized to speak, as well as to vote. So if we couldn't, I really hope we can get the live stream to work. To me, that's not, the stopping point for us not to do it. So anyone else have any thoughts? Since I would then entertain, the other question before we go into a motion is, if we look at doing this, say, on a Saturday, we could do it as quickly as September 19th. What would be the time frame that we would look for? Noontime, 2 o'clock? I find my calendar is pretty open these days, have been for the past, say, 5 months, but I don't know if other people have, especially now that there are some kids' activities going on, if maybe later would be better. If we did 2 o'clock, that should still give us enough time under the sun. Does anybody have any thoughts on time frame? Mrs. Trufalo?
My thought is just to announce that we can't have daycare. So often with these meetings, people know, and it's a Saturday afternoon, presumably, but we cannot make any provisions for childcare due to COVID.
Yep, good point. Thank you, Mrs. Trufalo. Yep.
And Margaret, I would have to agree with the 2 o'clock. I think we go a little later in the day, and the 2 o'clock would still allow us plenty of light. That would be my recommendation, to stick with 2 o'clock.
Anybody else have any thoughts or comments on that before I go ahead and look for a motion? Okay, so I would then, based on what I've heard, entertain a motion that our district-wide town meeting be scheduled for Saturday, September 19th at 2 p.m. It will be outside on the football field with an inclement weather provision for the high school gym. So I would entertain that motion.
So moved.
I'm going to take Mr. Mason, and do I have a second?
Wasn't me.
Okay, it wasn't, it
Wasn't me.
oh, sorry, Mr.
Mr.
Marks.
Marks,
then.
okay.
I am so terrible at that, sorry. And Mrs. Kojal has the second. Okay. With that being said, any further discussion on the date of Saturday, September 19th and the time of 2 p.m. outside on the football field with an inclement weather provision for the high school gym? Okay, seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
and Mrs. Hughes says yes. So that was unanimous. We now have a date and time for the district-wide town meeting. I know, Mrs. Varney, you will prepare the warrant because time is of the essence with this. We have to get the warrant posted. I'm kind of jumping ahead 2 items to just the warrant and the procedures. We all do need to sign the warrant so that it can be posted. It needs to be posted in the, we're doing the Gardner News and the Athol Daily News. And we'll need to send that item to them, which doesn't need our signatures because it's just a news blurb. We can send that tomorrow after we confirm how we should word the inclement weather provision for the location space. The other thing that I just asked that someone does, either your, Dr. Casavant or Mrs. Varney, is we should probably reach out to the Board of Health in Templeton just to bring them into the conversation. I know that you've had conversations already,
Yeah.
but
Well, I think that that's the other part is what I want to do is what I want to make sure is that we talked to the Board of Health. I want to also talk to Merrick O'Connell to make sure that it could physically, the location would be the high school, either way. And if that is okay, that it doesn't say exactly football field or gym or whatever. I just want to make sure, I want to go through that with them. We never got to that point. I don't think the Templeton folks never got to that point where they, could go back or forth, but I just want to do my due diligence on that.
perfect. So with that being said, assuming that all those things get worked out tomorrow, the committee will need to come by and sign the warrant. And we'd have to have this warrant posted at our, at the regular places. I think it's post offices in Templeton and a couple of places in Phillipston. I think we'd have to do that by Friday, if I'm not mistaken, because we need 14 days notice. So I asked the committee if you can be sure to come by the central office to sign. Mrs. Varney, if once those logistics are worked out and confirmed, if you could text the committee to let them know that the warrant's ready to be signed.
Will do.
Okay, and if anyone has an issue, we can try and work on a send it and sign it and send it back or something. We'll figure that out.
I could bring it to whoever, if that's the case. I'm happy to deliver it.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. And we'll look for that text from you, Mrs. Varney. The other piece of the district-wide town meeting is that there does need to be a moderator selected. And that is something that Dr. Casavant needs to take the minutes of, and we coordinate that meeting with the 2 boards of selectmen. So we'll have to go ahead and do that. So Dr. Casavant, if you can come up with a date and a time that maybe, the majority of people could be there. And we can try and find out what moderator might be available to moderate the meeting for us. That would be great. And I'm thinking that meeting will probably need to be a Zoom meeting because we will have a large group of people and we'll be inviting select board from Templeton and Phillipston. So I think a Zoom meeting is probably going to be the best. It should be a quick one, but I think that will probably be the best. And I know we can have that meeting anytime up until a few minutes before. the actual town, district-wide town meeting, but if we could check that off the list beforehand, that would be great. So we'll look to hear from you on that. Thank you. All right. I think that's all I have for the recertification and the district-wide town meeting. Does anybody have any comments on the budget or the district-wide town meeting at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on.
Margaret, actually, I just want to say, well, first, I do want to thank Dr. Kazavant for being the voice piece of the committee, during the meeting. I know that he talked about, and there's been a lot of talk about the misinformation going around, and I just want to say again that I think that this committee, and I applaud this committee for the transparency that they've had. I think that any of the questions that have come to this committee have been answered. We've provided information. We're very transparent on these meetings. I think Ms. Geister does an awesome job of providing us with the income sheets that we review, in all these meetings. I just want to thank this committee again for the hard work that they're doing, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Anybody else have any comments? Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes, will the boards of selectmen of both town be notified of this decision, say tomorrow, so that they know what the school committee is doing?
I think we can probably make that happen, Dr. Kazavant.
I was just going to say, just given all of this, what I'll try to do is obviously notify them of our intentions, and also to set up either way the meeting for the moderator. So all in one kind of email.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know last I spoke with Ms. Geister about sending over the recertification numbers. They were going to pull that together and email it to the towns as well, and then send a hard copy. So on top of the communication from Dr. Kazavant, they'll get that sooner rather than later as well. So, okay. Any other, Mrs. Mattson, yes?
Did we actually vote on the meeting and everything that we needed to vote on?
Yes, I think in the warrant, the amount of the budget we just recertified, so that's done. We've picked the time and the place. And Mrs. Varney, I don't know if you're looking at that, looking at the sample warrant, we cover all of the blanks?
Yes, I believe we did. Yep.
Okay. I thought there was a motion that was made, but we never voted on something, but I couldn't remember what it was because there was discussion and then we stopped. So just wanted to make sure.
I honestly don't remember. I know we voted on the 4 items to recertify. We voted on the date and the time.
Yep, I have that.
Okay, and if you can remember, please let me know. I think we're okay, because I'm pretty sure we voted on everything we needed to. Anybody?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right, anything else? Okay, so we're going to move on. Next up would normally be the business manager's report. Ms. Geister isn't here with us this evening. And additionally, this is one of these new meetings we've added. So as far as financial reports, August just ended. So we don't really have any new financial reports that differ from what we were given at the August 16th meeting, August 19th meeting, I'm sorry. So we'll get new reports on September 16th to look at for financials. And Dr. Kazavant spoke about 1/12 and other things. So I think from a numbers perspective, we're pretty much covered at this point. Next up, school opening. So Dr. Kazavant, I'm going to turn this over to you and then I'll jump in as you need me to.
Perfect. So what was probably the most, the strangest opening in history took place last week. Last Thursday, teachers came back and they'd be here for a grand total of 10 days, with a lot to do. I think that which I think behind the curtain, what folks don't know is that we were remote for a long time, but a lot of the things that we need to improve as our community may, let us know through our surveys, again, it caught us off guard back in March, and really the expectation is that's not going to happen again, meaning that, just completely out of the blue. So, we have a I really can't show you because it's too, obviously it's too large, but we have a matrix of trainings that really cover the gamut, everything from course technology, PPE, but a lot of time for teachers to figure out how are we going to move forward. So that has been, that's really been our focus, quite frankly, the last, say, four days. And a lot of work has been done. I guess from the pragmatic side, certainly for the parents who are listening or will listen, you know, you'll receive, there's a lot of information, and I know it's been trickling out, but in the next day or, you know, again, with being Friday, but you're receiving a letter to really hopefully clarify what exactly your child is going to do, whether they're cohort A, cohort B, pardon me, full remote, etc. And by that, I mean, you know, it's not going to say that every child has math first day, you know, first block, but it's going to, you know, certainly, again, go over the hours of operation, how long school will be open, how will that work? And in essence, you know, they're going to be here. If you're a middle school or a high school student, you can't be here any earlier than 7:30. You're going to go right to your classroom for 7:45. There will be no loitering. There'll be no staying around because we can't, of course, have large groups. They'll rotate through their progression of courses or classes, pardon me. And on or about, oh gosh, 11:45, if I have my memory serves, they of course will then go home, whether it be by bus or pickup, however that's been arranged. They'll have a bag lunch afforded to them, and they will go home for the last. Basically, they'll have lunch, time to get home, and they have 2 classes. Now, I've just literally detailed in a very small, you know, summary what the middle school, high school day may look like. And of course, that's going to come out. So we know that it might stir some more questions. It may confuse some folks, you know, whatever. But we're trying to get that out as soon as possible. But I want to make sure that folks know that we understand what have we been doing all this time. A lot of it is that we're making sure that we know where every child is. So over the last 2-3 weeks or so, you know, from the survey, we're trying to put kids in these cohorts by family and making sure we're getting busing set up. And there's been changes, and people have gone from cohort to full remote, from full remote to cohort A. Oh, wait, it can't be A, it's got to be B. Well, next week, there will be no more. Well, we're going to basically close the window for that. And really, ultimately, not really giving up. You can always go remote. So if one thing you hear, you can always go remote. What can happen is coming back into cohort A or B once we get started, probably for the first quarter. And that's because we're trying to establish these cohorts. 1, 2, busing comes involved, and we're also don't want to be mixing, you know, cross contamination. We don't want to be adding kids and subtracting kids out. Plus, we don't have a lot of space, as everyone knows about the 3-foot rule. So that's all we're gonna start pushing that out. Hopefully by the end of this week, you'll get that letter, and we'll be prepared for that. The facilities update, I was gonna have Rick come to this meeting, but he's sleeping. I'm sure he and his staff. Remember, everything that we have in these rooms that are non-essential, which really means almost everything except for desks, have got to be moved out, because we have to utilize every inch of floor space to get us, you know, to by the 3x3 or in possible 6x6, if in those rare cases. But everything else has to be moved out and it has to be stored. Well, that's a lot of moving. That is a lot of stuff if you think about it, and that's just one of many things that they've been moving forward on. The meals update, you know, when we developed this the agenda, we were bemoaning the fact that the state did not continue the free lunch for all, basically, and we couldn't quite figure it out because they, you know, went all the way till June. Well, I think it was earlier this week, if memory serves, they reauthorized that until December. That's a big deal, because we have been and will be working on ways to feed our kids in our community. And again, we got to get busing everything set up first, but Now that makes it a lot easier, quite frankly. So that's a great thing. That's a big deal. Like it is. It's just a big deal. Sports. So finally today, I believe the Midwatch had a meeting. And again, it's not you talk about a lot of moving parts here. And so what my job to the committee today is to say, okay, if in the guidance has been pretty much, it's solidified now. It changed a few times, but if you're in a red zone at this point, you can't have sports. So the state has taken that right off the plate, taken right off the responsibility. If a school committee, so no one has to make a decision on that. The state has made a decision. Really, everything else they've put on your plate, quite frankly. So if you are a community, for example, in I think it's yellow or green or whatever, you'd have to, or if you were full remote, you would have to make the decision locally to allow sports to happen. One of the things that has come up, and I know what the Department of Ed feels about this, because they've been open about it, is that if your school is in remote, and by the way, this would be another voting opportunity if we were in remote, do you allow students to play sports if you're in full remote? That gets a little trickier depending on why you're in remote. Also, the other part of it is that if you are not full remote, like us, we're hybrid, do you allow students who are full remote to play sports? And I think that is, that has been and again, Desi has said that you may make that decision. But again, when we think about why folks are full remote, and that's because they are either compromised, their parents have decided that it's unsafe for them personally. It might be problems with exposure, et cetera. So they've made that decision. And so that is before the committee at some point. They're going to work in pods. So I think I may have discussed this at some point, so wave me off, but ultimately they're very local pods. And for our pod, I believe, I haven't looked at the PowerPoint unless it's changed, but our pod will be Ash West, Gardner, Winchendon, Quabbin, and us. That's 5. I think that's everybody. If I've missed I don't think I've missed a team. So it's local. You'll only play X amount, like I think each town 3 or 4 times, depending. All the sports have been modified. I haven't gone through the modifications, to be very frank. I don't know, but I know that it's 7-on-7 field hockey, I believe, and they've made some changes to soccer. So, I mean, I know Ms. Parker is a big sports fan, so she might be able to help me out as well. But if I've missed some key points here, but so ultimately sports, it's been approved. Like, so the state has said, okay, with the following conditions. The MIA took it up at that point, made its changes, made its tweaks. Every league has done something different, from what I understand. We only really care about Midwatch. I mean, that's the only thing that we're thinking about. Transportation is elusive still at this point in time. Again, unless maybe they've given some guidance into that. Again, the PowerPoint get out today, and we just haven't had time to review it. But that, in terms of opening of school, these are what we have. And by the way, everyone were notified today about the sports piece, and a lot of districts haven't even been able to make the vote because they haven't had a meeting yet. So I guess I'll stop, because again, that's a lot of information all at once, and entertain any questions.
Does anyone on the committee have any questions? I'm going to say outside of sports, because we are going to need to take some votes. So we'll keep that as a separate discussion. Are there any questions for Dr. Casavant on anything other than sports at this moment?
Facilities. Yeah.
Mrs. Trufalo?
Yes, if our students in our district go remote, do they have to have a reason to be remote, or is it just parental choice to be remote?
So when we initially discussed all of this, it was the understanding that if folks did not feel that they did not feel comfortable, it was not safe enough, their child had a pre-existing condition, it was based on health concerns. They didn't have to prove anything. In other words, they didn't have to provide any documentation. or anything like that. That wasn't necessary, because, you know, parents needed and wanted to make the choice. So, so I think, you know, that's the understanding, and so when I've talked to parents, that's exactly why they've kept their children remote.
So the children who are remote are concerned about physical safety, meaning, you know, that they have some reason that if they came back, they'd be in danger of COVID more difficultly.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's important to note if we're going to be talking about sports and who plays.
One thing that I missed on facilities, it dawned on me that, again, we've been working with the union on a lot of things, just because the rules of the road have changed. So we've got to get a lot of things worked out, and it's been great. One of the things about airflow, right? So we talked about this in our facilities meetings and before, and we have a management company here that service all of our ventilators, all of those type of things. And we 2.5 weeks ago, I spoke personally in person with the gentleman who does the work, and they were going to come out and they were going to do all so we can give official readings. We did the math of it, but there's a physical way that also you can make that happen. And they backed out because I guess as a corporate decision, they have said that they do not want that. The corporate office basically said, we don't want any of these tests being done because it might make us liable if something should happen later on down the road, which of course is, you know, very frustrating, quite frankly. But Rick, who's, you know, a dogged, if nothing else, he has 2 companies. Again, you know, we contacted 2 companies. The first one who gets here wins, and so we have a group coming tomorrow to walk the buildings and to start the process, or to begin the process. The other thing too is that you hear a lot about filters, you know, MERV 8s, MERV 11s, MERV 13s. Never even heard of these things. MERV Griffin was the only MERV I knew, quite frankly. But we have MERV 8s, which are pretty standard. And speaking with the union and speaking with a lot of people, quite frankly, you know, MERV 13s are very, very expensive. And by the way, they're harder to get than toilet paper. They are back ordered for months and months and months. So the MERV 11s are a good fit for us. So what did you do with the grant money, Dr. Cassidy? Well, one of them is that we bought enough MERV 11s to switch out in December, when it would be a natural time to switch out the filters. We've already cleaned and switched out all the filters in this building and other buildings as well. And so you know what I mean? So we have them, and they'll be here before we actually have to flip, you know, to change them out. So, you know, we've, in terms of facilities piece of things, we've certainly been as proactive as possible. And by we, I mean Rick and his group, and Anne Marie, obviously. We've run into a few stone walls, and it's you know, it's frustrating because these companies, we pay them money to manage our facilities, you know, or certain parts of our facilities, and to take a stance like that is, you know, again, it's depressing at times, you know, when they're telling you no. But to that extent, though, Rick and company have done a great job. Transportation, we think we've got that buttoned up. That's going to be one of the things that's going to be pushed out to folks. We have bus passes and all those type of things with lanyards, and but we're up on that as well. So sorry, forgot transportation.
Anything else non-sports related? Okay, so let's start the sports discussion. I'm gonna try and speak to what I think I've heard and what I know, and Dr. Kazman, just correct me if I spout anything that is not correct. What we're looking at is, I believe the MIAA came forth with like a 4-season, there's a fall 2, they've pushed football and cheerleading and unified basketball, I think, were the 3 things into this fall 2 category, which is sometime in February. Don't even get me started on how we're going to play football in February, but that's beside the point.
March, but
yeah. So what that leaves then for us specifically, because I know there's other sports that are typical fall sports, but the ones that we have would be the girls field hockey. Actually it's just field hockey because anyone can play. Boys soccer, girls soccer, and cross country. So those are the 4 sports we're looking at for a fall season. Okay. I guess the first question that I would, I'm sorry. And then also there's been discussion about off-season coaching.
yes, thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Which let me have you explain what that is so people can understand what that would entail.
So again, I was just trying to find the PowerPoint, but in essence, what the MIAA board voted is that they would allow out of season coaching, which is a big no-no normally. So I'll use football. So if they were to allow out of season coaching for football, then they would be allowed legally, in a sense, to hold practices, although with all the precautions. So let's just, no one's tackling each other, no one's doing those type of things. And it would be limited to a certain number over a period of time. So that way they could have access to the kids, and again, many of these kids have not had organized sports since March. And I'm not saying football, I could use any sport, but, and so depending on what season it actually is, okay, they've kind of looked ahead and said, okay, can we do any, what coaches can then do some out of season coaching? So they've approved that. I think it's not like every day. They don't want people competing with like, well, I don't want to play soccer, I'm going to go to football or volleyball practice or whatever the case is. So I think they've limited the number of those. That's very different. And I don't know ultimately what the exact rules on that, again, because they had the meeting today, but we were busy. So, but that is one of the things that is allowed.
Thank you. All right, so the first item up for discussion and then a vote is, do we want to engage in the fall sports for field hockey, boys and girls soccer, and cross country? Plus allow the off-season coaching, which would be all part of that fall package, whatever would fall into that. I'd entertain a motion if we want to do it that way, unless someone has some other specific questions they want to put forth first, and then we can talk about motions. Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes, do we have the money to pay the coaches for these sports?
The answer to that is yes. Right now, we couldn't. There's no way that we would offer contracts out for all the coaches as we often do at times. For like the 2 seasons or whatever. One of the parts that I missed is that there is no middle school sports, period. So in a sense, you'd be realizing some savings there. And we're co-oping for this season. We haven't finalized all that, but we have a plan to co-op soccer with Winchendon. Voted on that I think it was last spring at this point. So there'll be some savings there, in other words, right? Worked into it. So the answer is that for this season, this fall season, or season 1, I should say, is the answer to that is yes. We're okay for that. We're going to have to be, again, very prudent and look forward, because we're not going to receive any revenue. We don't. Well, typical fall is when we receive most of our revenue, the gate, right? Football games. Basketball would be probably the second highest yield, but that helps offset cost, transportation, whatever the case is. And we're not going to have that this year, because there's also there's stipulations about who can watch the game, how many people can watch the game, how many people per player can watch the game. It's 2 people per player, and they've waived the group requirement, how many people in a group you can have for schools. And so the answer to your yes, for this season, if we were to go into 1/12 for much longer, and if it was like even extended more, I think we'd have to have a serious conversation, because then we get into, again, more sports. And I don't know that we would be able to survive all that financially.
And Chris, just, I don't want to put it out one way or the other, but with the special town meeting coming up and the status of the vote in the 1/12 and everything, and talking about potentially losing some additional staffing, you know what I mean? I don't know if it's a good idea. I'm not sure that it's a good idea to be spending any additional funding on any that, you know, I think the teaching staff would be the most important thing. I think anything extracurricular is probably not a good idea.
Well, you know, without that complication,
Yeah.
right, on a date, look, on a normal day, whatever a normal day is, but even without 1/12 consideration, you know, what is this? Well, so we're here for kids, and athletics and the arts are part of that process. So you just
Agreed.
right off the bat, that's great. Which is very, very important. So you have kids who live for sports. They haven't played sports forever because there's no opportunity to do that. You have some districts who have taken away sports, like because of budget, they have no sports. It's really demoralized the community. I could go on. So they're important. I mean, you know, we know this. We've talked about this.
Okay.
Then you add on this situation in which, you know, you may very well, we're going to have to cut people, right? Just to make sure that we stay balanced in terms of finance. All right. So then you start going, okay, that affects kids, this, that, you know, and so both affect kids, meaning the lack of sports or the taking away of sports and of course, support or personnel. This is probably one of the harder things in my head to really negotiate both ways, because you could argue that why it's been bad enough, for God's sakes, don't get them on both sides. You know, it's one of the few things that, you know, lure kids, and I use that word, you know, lure appropriately, you know, into schools at times, and we want to be engaging and we want to, you know, to invite them back. So, but it's not lost on me, Jeff. It's one of those things where you go, well, we just got all these people.
I get that, Chris. I think part of what I struggle with it is I think part of the attraction or the benefit to the sports is the socializing of the athletes. You know what I mean? Getting them together and doing this in this scenario that we're talking about. You know what I mean? What will, I mean, I'm not sure what it would look like. You know, what would they be doing? Would they be coming in, looking at films? I mean, are they practicing?
No.
Are they actually competing?
Yep.
I mean,
yes. So again, and I will, as soon as I am able to, you know, get everything together, and I will send it to the committee. There are practices, absolutely.
Okay.
Sports can't start until September 18th, period. That's the other part of it. I think we've discussed that. Nothing can happen until the 18th. So again, because some districts are just now getting this information, now they're trying to make decisions. We have to make sure everyone has their physicals, you know, the whole, you know, routine, you know, and yeah, they're gonna play. They're just gonna play the same teams over and over again. Basically, I don't make it sound like that, but it's competition. It's what it is. And so they were just trying to make sure that we're just like school. We're trying to make it as best we can with all the, you know, with everything that's, you know, been thrown at us. And so they've made the accommodations for the sports.
All right, Mrs. Charter, I think you're next, and then we'll go to Mrs. Trifilo.
You know, I just feel like, I mean, the challenge is obvious to get these sports going. Who are they going to play and all that stuff? How to keep them socially distanced. But that being said, we've taken away, nobody's fault, but we're taking away so much from these kids. If they have the opportunity to play the sport, then let them play. Let them do something to get out there and have, I mean, these poor seniors, what is their senior year even going to look like for them? You know, let them play.
Yeah. And so then you tell me about the seniors, and I start to, you know, honestly, you know, these poor kids. I'm just saying it all factors in, and I think you're absolutely right. If conventional wisdom, if you believe what everyone says, you know, by flu season we'll all be out anyway, and it won't, you know, we'll you know, I don't know what season 2 is going to look like. Again, you can't go too far down into the rabbit hole, you know, that way. You can't. What we know is this. This is, you know, one of the things we know. The reason why we're going to be able to open up, not only because we've got, you know, great staff and all the wonderful things, it is very healthy in our area right now. You're not, you know, lots of folks think that you're probably not going to get the doomsdayers anyway, right, are not going to get much healthier than you are right now. You know, in terms of positive COVID cases in our area, in our bubble. I'm going to call it the bubble, but those 4 communities, yes, there have been COVID cases, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, we do very well out here. Will that get worse? No one knows, and no one hopes that, but do you take the opportunity now, just like we're doing with school, right? We're getting in, we're going to do the cohort, we're going to do the right thing, knowing fully well that we could, you know, go out, you know, a month later because of whatever. You know, that would of course end sports anyway. So do you know, I don't know. It's a really, you could argue equally on both sides. You really can. You really can.
Mrs. Trufalo?
Yeah, I was just looking for a budget number, what these fall sports would cost. I know we don't have it right now, but I'd like to have it available to the committee. Because if we're looking at instructional cuts, in the situation that we're in, I just need to know what that number is.
Sure. I won't be able to add busing because we're not, and I can do that. That's not a problem. It just, busing is going to be whether we can even bus or not. So there might be some, you know, some rule about being able to drive, but I can certainly give you the salary and, you know, and because we're co-oping too, that will also save money. We'll work that together. I know that some districts are putting out a survey to their kids again and saying, hey, do you want to play fall sports as is? Because AAU is very prominent, and especially in the sports that we're talking about. Soccer, very large contingent of AAU soccer teams, very competitive soccer teams. I've received calls on that. You know, I know that field hockey, they have a league. I think it's 7-on-7, and I'm probably not doing it justice, but there's an option for them. I don't know about our runners. I don't know what they have as an option, you know, for our cross country kids. I don't know what the option is there, other than, you know, high school sports. But you know, there are some options, and people have said to me, we're just going to go and play AAU because it's more competitive. We can play by the rule, not like the real soccer rules. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. You want the most opportunities for students that you can have. I get all that. What concerns me is the reality of this town meeting. Nobody knows how that's coming out and what our budget's going to be. If that's the case, we'll have to look at it then, that's all. Have to look at, it won't have started. What date's the meeting?
The 19th is what we've,
Okay, so basically you're not into it yet, so we can look at, if we're cutting all kinds of things, then we can look at that as well. That the community just has to know that that's a real possibility if our numbers get skewed.
I agree. I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. I mean, so I think that with that, I will definitely get the salaries. You know, there's always costs for refs, you know, all those costs. And I'll certainly will present that. I think that almost in any event, we're going to have a meeting probably prior to the 19th, because we're going to have to, you know, there's an MOU, you know, we're going to have to talk about and some other things. But I think that gives the opportunity. People can't start, we can certainly get their information from kids. There's no harm in getting their physicals in, seeing who's willing to play. I have to say that I know that girls soccer's ramped up. I'm afraid to look at Twitter after this meeting, but I know that they're ready to go. So I will, but I'll get you that information.
Chris, with all of this, with all the guidelines and everything that is set upon us, do we have to come up with a whole lot of different training for both the staff, the coaches, the students, and a whole bunch of set up protocols for the district, or are we following, you know, the statewide mandates? How is that going to work?
So yeah, so I'm going to call them the rules committee, not knowing what else, but the guidelines really dictate what you can do in competition, but in sports. Pardon me, in practice. So it's pretty, I have to say, it's pretty well laid out. It's okay. Pretty detailed. The coach, yes, absolutely. There's definitely gonna have to be conversations with coaches and kids. There's no locker rooms any longer. You know, you don't go to the visitors locker room. There's none of that. You come, you play, you go. You know, they know exactly how many people need to be on the sideline, how many kids. You know, so it's pretty detailed. They've done a lot of work. I give them a lot of credit. Those subcommittees did a ton of work in terms of thinking about, you know, all of it.
I have a couple of questions. One, I saw yesterday that Winchendon and Murdoch will be going full remote. So what does that do to our co-oping with them?
So just like the committee before me, they will need, they had an emergency meeting, I think a couple of days ago, but it wasn't because of sports, obviously. So they're going to have to, whenever they decide, they're going to have this same question before them. And in speaking with Superintendent Winchendon, we've definitely talked about sports. We talked about keeping, the co-op alive and all of those things. Again, that was prior to, having to go full remote. So I don't have a sense, obviously, but I'm definitely going to reach out again anyway. We talk quite a bit. So, I'll ask her what her, when is that on her agenda? So I don't know the impact.
Okay, good. I just didn't know if they also had discussed it. I know it wasn't part of the article that came out.
Right.
So I didn't know if you knew anything more.
No.
So with that being said, does someone on the committee want to make a motion about sports? I'm just going to lay this out there. Typically we make a positive motion. So an affirmative vote would mean, yes, we want to do something. So if someone wanted to make a motion, it should be perhaps to go ahead and move forth with the fall sports of cross country, girls soccer, boys soccer, and field hockey, as well as the off-season coaching.
Madam Chair, can I make a suggestion? Maybe if we have to meet, let's say it's next week. Let's say that's when we have to, because we've got some other things, to do. Would it make sense then by that point I can show you the budget, or do you want to vote it either way and then maybe I don't know. I mean, I can get you the information.
Yeah, that was actually going to be the second half. Or do we want to wait? No, that's good. I'm glad you jumped in because that was going to be, or do we want to wait? Our next scheduled meeting is September 16th. So that is 2 weeks away. The kids will already be back in school, but it is prior to the date where practices would kick off.
There you go.
So we could bring this up as a voting item at that meeting since we'll have more information. I did just want to offer a couple of thoughts that I have on sports. I think most of you know that I'm a pretty big sports mom, and I'm fully behind it. But I will say that I think it's actually been very irresponsible for the MIAA and DESE to push forth with fall sports at this time. These kids aren't even back in the building yet, and we're already trying to figure out how to put sports on a field. That really bothers me, that I really think that we should have gotten into a stable school environment and then move forth with sports. I think we need to explore doing it. Timing to me is an issue. So that's my statement on that. I think personally for us in this district, I see this as a budget issue because on my notes, I see added costs, some of the things that Mr. Marks referred to, some of the things Mrs. Trifolo has been asking. We have to pay people. What are the additional costs for, protective equipment, anything above and beyond that we really don't have full information about yet, but are there those costs that I think we as a committee need to understand? So I'm glad that was brought up and we'll get some of those numbers. I also get very concerned about cohorts. One of the reasons that we're looking to do cohorts and keep kids in cohorts is so we can do contact tracing. But now we're going to have cohort A and cohort B who are going to meet together on a field after school. And now they go back to their core cohorts. And if something happens, how do we trace? And they're going to go to different districts and intermingle with other students. That could be a potential tracing issue. It gets me concerned with a lot of the things that we're trying to minimize. I see it as we've got to look to fix the amount of variables we're dealing with when we start. And as those start to pan out, we can look to add other ones in. And to me, this is a variable that, again, if we could push it off, to me, it would make more sense. Again, my opinion. The other thing that I see as a potential issue is there's some equity issues. We've got classes going on till just about noon and we send the kids home and then they have to do remote learning. They'd have to get back here for practices. We're not providing transportation. What about those kids who don't have a parent or someone at home to bring them back to the field? That concerns me that now there may be players that are impacted, or we're putting some of our students potentially at risk to drive others around to get them to practices. Again, that's a personal decision on their part, but we would be, the ones who would put that out there for them to do. And then I think equity with programs. There's a lot of focus on sports. I have yet to hear how we're going to come up with doing a musical or have drama, do marching band. And to me, that's an issue. We can't just look at sports. We should be looking at everything and trying to figure out how we have activities for all students. So I'm really disappointed that there hasn't been the same focus. And I know that there's an MIAA, so they have those resources to do it. So I understand the whys behind it, but to me, again, it's an equity issue for those kids who have other things that they'd normally be doing that we can't provide. I get concerned about that. And I think we just need to think about that. So those are my thoughts on sports. I would love to see them happen. I just want to make sure that we're making the right decisions for the right reasons. These kids need to be socialized. They need to get outside. They need to move around. I know that, but I get very concerned with all of these other things that I've brought up. So that being said, do we anyone have anything else to say? Or does someone want to just comment that we should push this off till the 16th?
Can I just ask, if we do push it off until the 16th, will they still, we were talking about getting testing and physicals and stuff. They can still go ahead and do that stuff in preparation of our vote. Is that correct?
I don't see why they wouldn't. I mean, they have to. In order to come back to school, you have to have, for the most part, your physicals for certain grades. So I think that what I would actually like to see is, in this 2-week period, what do our signups look like? Get some more information from our co-op partner. What are they thinking they're going to end up having to do, so we know what the numbers, can we field the teams that we want? Maybe learn more about what the options are. And maybe, for cross country, you said you didn't really know, but I'm sure they were running virtual events. Are there so that we can do something? If we choose not to go forward, we have other things, if we choose to go forward, we'll have more information around how that will look.
So I can tell you that I found the document. So if I can, I'll just read about the practice, which gets to Jeff's comment. September 18th is the first practice, but that date most likely will be used to have parent, player, coach meetings in person if possible to go over all the new rules. And there's a ton of new rules. Practice no more than 5 times a week for 90 minutes. Hand sanitizing prior to and after practice. Masks are worn. Gym bags are at least 6 feet apart. And gym bags and equipment must be sanitized after practice. No practice in rain, or if rain is in the forecast, the athletes must have multiple masks in case one gets wet due to unforeseen rain, mist, or sweat. I mean, I could read, it is very, very detailed. So there's no lack of direction, I will tell you. So I'm going to clean this up and I'll send it to the committee for your review. Again, it was sent to me late, so I didn't have a chance to review it myself, but did find it. But all the questions are, many of the answers that you seek are in this document.
Great. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we push it off until the 16th, until we have some additional information.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor to move off voting on sports until we have additional information until the 16th.
Second.
And I have a second. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll do a roll call and make it official. Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So this will be on our agenda for a final vote on sports for the September 16th meeting. In the interim, Dr. Kazavant will forward lots of information to the committee, so we'll have more information. Could we also just notify the middle school families, especially those who have already signed up? Because of course, our athletic portal was open since whenever it was, I think maybe back in February. So, and I know that information about middle school sports is just coming out. If we could be sure that maybe those middle school folks are notified so they are not wondering what's happening with sports, that would be great if we could do that. And then again, if we can figure out how to take a temperature of how many kids we do have, because I think you're exactly right too. With those sports teams, the AAU teams around, there may not be enough to participate, that want to participate, or look to us to participate just because of the constraints that we're going to have to put in place.
Okay.
Okay, so that covers sports, and I know we didn't come to any resolution on it, but I think this is a very good discussion to have, because there's so much information that is really just coming to light. And I guess we'll see too, it'll give us time to get the kids in school for a couple of days before we meet again. The only other thing on reopening is Ms. Geister had been in touch with our bus company to discuss some costs. Would that be okay? I don't, I had sent her a quick note to say, do we have to go over this tonight? Could we wait till the 16th to discuss? Unfortunately, we didn't connect before she had to leave today. So I would like to just push off the discussion on transportation until the next time we meet. I'm hoping that that will be okay. They were trying to negotiate with us on, we're not going to need the bus every day since, Wednesdays we won't be in school, and what does that look like? But there's also issues with regional transportation reimbursement, if that's the case, and some other things. So I think we need more information. So Dr. Kazimian, if that makes sense, if we could push that off.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else that anyone has on reopening?
No.
Okay, so we'll move on in our agenda. We've got the student handbooks to approve. I know that a red line version went out to everybody a day or two ago, and I don't know if everyone had a chance to review everything in the handbook, but we typically like to get these approved, obviously, before school starts. Ms. Cleese, yes.
I just wanted to note that you have the elementary, middle, and high handbooks on the agenda, but there's also the district-wide. It's all like kind of one of a piece. So just wanted to call attention to that.
Great, thank you. And actually, that was something, I'm glad you've reminded me that I think when I was speaking to Mrs. Varney, said, oh, we don't have all of that. And thank you for reminding me, because I forgot when we combined it all. So I would entertain a motion, and I'm thinking that we probably should just motion to approve the district-wide handbook, which contains the district-wide information, plus the high school, plus the middle school, plus the elementary, if that makes sense to people, since it is one large document now, instead of separate documents for everybody. And if anyone thinks that that makes sense, I would entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
So I have a motion from Mrs. Kojal. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second from Mr. Mason. Questions or comments on the student handbook as we've received and reviewed? Okay, I don't see any. We will do a roll call vote then to approve those handbooks. Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes, so we've now approved those handbooks. I do just want to point out that as we continue to work on policy updates on the policy subcommittee, those handbooks may need to be looked at and adjusted based on any policy adjustments we may be forced to make based on things. So I just want to put that out there. They're approved as of what we know today, but just like everything, it's what we know today and maybe not what we know tomorrow. So, all right, thank you. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Yep, next up, school committee comments. Are there any comments by the committee at this point? No, I think we've talked ourselves out. Surplus items. We have a bunch of surplus items on the agenda, and I'm just going to pull them up so I can refer to exactly what was in the file. The first vote we'll take is we've got some surplus items. So I would entertain a motion to surplus the following items as was presented on the agenda. And Mrs. Varney, correct me if I'm getting into this wrong, please. We have 3 sets of crutches, 4 4-drawer filing cabinets that do not lock, 2 rolling blood pressure monitors that are both broken, 1 black couch seating that is unable to be cleaned. It's very old and not in support of social distancing. The other group there is 130 text and 2 teacher manuals that are outlined in that middle school textbook surplus document that's attached. They're is that correct? Did I get that right? They're Glencoe Science Level Blue, published by McGraw-Hill, copyright 2008. Let's deal with those things first. I would entertain a go ahead.
Wait, I'm sorry, just interject. There's actually, one of the attachments is also another spreadsheet
Got it.
of different textbooks,
All
more.
right. So additionally, there's an attachment to this document. I'll read them fairly quickly. There's World Studies, Foundations of Geography, 46 copies, World Studies. I'm actually not going to read. There's a lot of them on here. The listing was on the agenda. It's available for anyone to see. I would entertain a motion to go ahead and surplus all of the items that I've read, plus the items contained in that. It's called MS Textbook Surplus Document.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Marks. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mrs. Kojal. Any discussions on any of those items? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
and Mrs. Hughes says yes. So those items have been approved unanimously to surplus. The next group of items for surplus is a list of items contained in an attachment to the agenda called PMES Surplus List, August 2020. There's a listing of sorted items. We've got chairs, tables, cabinet shelving, miscellaneous desks, and other miscellaneous items that we've gone through the building and have declared them as surplus. I would entertain a motion to approve for surplus the items listed in the PMES surplus list, August 2020 document.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Marks. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mrs. Kojal, I guess. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll do roll call. Mrs. Mattson?
I actually did have a question.
Sure.
What if we do end up using PMES again for some reason, and we've gotten rid of some things that are in that school?
Okay, maybe Dr. Casavant?
I would, so I don't know a circumstance when that would happen. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I'm not saying it won't. The things that we just have no storage, quite frankly. We can't keep it there. Remember, I want to make sure we're clear about something, is that those are district items, as folks know. There was some questions about whether or not they could be removed because they belong to the those are district property. If I understand, and I think I do, is that the towns get first dibs anyway for all surplus items, because in essence they've paid for it, right? So if that is the case, then certainly that it could go through that process, and but we would have to do this because we're going to have to clear out that building at some point. We just can't leave it the way it is. The town may have a use for it, and so there's just no place to store all of that, all of those materials.
All right, any other questions? Okay, so again, we'll do roll call vote. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Trifilo,
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier. Come back to her in a second.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Mason,
Aye.
and Mrs. Hughes says aye. So those items in that list have now been approved for surplus. All right, let's see what's next. Other items not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours before the meeting. I don't believe there's anything that has come up that it was not already on the agenda. So next up is the superintendent report. I know, Dr. Casavant, you've spent a lot of time talking, really go about enrollment. I won't even ask you to do that right now because we'll wait
Sorry.
back in school.
Yes, I'm done. I don't have any more information.
What about the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee? Because I know
All
you
right.
sent that letter out.
So I've sent out the letter. I'm guessing, I don't know. I have not spoke to either, but I believe that the Templeton Select Board meets tonight. It may be an agenda item. I'm guessing, I don't know. They know. I know that Phillipston has received it. So I don't know where it is in that process in terms of getting back to us or any of that, but I will certainly reach out and find out what the status.
Okay, as a committee, we're going to need to, I think it's one person from each town. So it's 2 people from this committee, 1 from Templeton, 1 from Phillipston, needs to be on the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. If you're interested, why don't you go ahead and shoot me an email? We'll start with that, and we'll see who might be interested. And then at our next meeting, we'll bring this up as an agenda item under the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee update, and officially appoint our 2 members who are interested. Okay. All right. We're going to pass over curriculum and instruction at this point. I know, Kate, you've got a nice report that you're going to present to us next time. But in the interest of time, because it's already almost 7 o'clock and we do have executive session to get to, we're going to pass that over for this evening. Subcommittee reports, I think we've reported out on everything that we possibly could have during our other discussions. I will take a moment if anyone feels they need to say something about a subcommittee they're on.
Like that.
Go ahead, Mrs. Trifilo.
No, yes, it's not relevant to that per se, although it could come under academic if you had to. I just want to acknowledge all the work that the administration and their staff have to do to be able to open this district. And, with the high goal of having kids in person, which we know is all good for kids, but with a safe number. I mean, this is hours and hours, and the mental, if you put an emoji with it, the head would be blowing off it so much of the time. So I just want to acknowledge that, and also that the fact that the teaching staff and the culture is still harmonious is a lot to be said for competent administration. So I thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Trifilo. I think, I know I definitely echo your sentiments, and I'm sure the entire committee does as well. So thank you for bringing that up and pointing that out again. Anybody else have any last comments that weren't covered? We have no correspondence. Our next meeting is Wednesday, September 16th. I would like to just make a statement to the public about our meetings. We had hoped to have tonight's meeting in person. We actually had all signed up to come in person. Unfortunately, we are just working out the technical logistics of having our meetings in person and be available live stream. And our thought was it was more important to have this live streamed and real timed for the public to see than for us to be in the building when that capability was not available. So the goal is, it looks like we should be on target to have our next meeting in person on the 16th, which would be 5 o'clock in the Kiva. If that changes, obviously we'll let everybody know, but we're looking to figure out how to continue to provide this live stream capability so that everyone can be a part of the meeting while not having to crowd into a small space. So I thank everyone in the public for their patience with us while we make that happen. And I thank the committee for being willing and ready and able. Unfortunately, the technology just wasn't there to do this meeting in person tonight. So I do want to say thank you to the committee for that. And obviously to Dr. Casavan and the entire administrative team as well for being willing to come in. So if there's nothing else, I would then entertain a motion to go into executive sessions for number 3 and number 6. And I'll read the definition in just a second. The meeting will return into open session after we're done. So we will be coming back into open session. And we're going to motion to enter into executive session for reason number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation with the NDEA and or the UFCW if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. And for reason number 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property with regards to PMES and TES if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. And again, the meeting will return into open session immediately following. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Kojal. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mrs. Mattson. Any questions or comments before we roll call? Okay, seeing none. Mrs. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal,
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo. Oop, you're on mute, Mrs. Trifilo.
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier,
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
and Mrs. Hughes says yes. So we will now be adjourning to go into executive session, and then we will come out in open session once we're done. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. The live stream will continue with a banner that says executive session. And then once we come out, we'll go back to being live streamed as a group. But thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. And again, we've kind of kept track of comments and questions. And I'm sure that Mrs. Varney will have Dr. Casavant answering anything that needs to get addressed that we weren't able to cover that we can. So thank you, everyone. And I am now going to invite the school committee to join the breakout room for our meeting. Hank. Okay, do we have everybody? Yes, okay. I believe that we are back on YouTube live streaming at this point. If I could maybe just get a yep, I see us on the screen. So I'm calling the meeting of the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee back into order for open session. We have left executive session and voted on that. We are back in open session. We have one item left on the agenda to go over, and that would be to vote on the memorandum of understanding, or the MOU, with the NDEA, which is our teachers union. So I would entertain a motion to approve the MOU that was presented, the NDEA bargaining proposal, as presented to the committee. I would entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Kojal. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second by Mrs. Chartier. Anyone have any questions, comments about this memorandum of understanding? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So it is unanimous that we have approved this MOU with the NDEA, the bargaining proposal as presented. So Dr. Casavant will be in to sign it and make that happen. If you would alert the NDEA as such, then we have a completed proposal and memorandum of understanding. So with that being said, I
Motion to adjourn.
have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have to do roll call. Mrs. Mattson?
Aye.
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes, and thank you all.
Yes, Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. Thank everyone for coming and staying on and hanging in there for so long. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is September 16th, so we will see you then. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Good
Aye.
night.